Welcome everyone. This is the February OpenNTF webinar, and our topic today is Domino REST APIs from a Domino administrator perspective. And our presenters today, Heather Hottenstein and Matt Munse, and Ron Wilkins is sitting in the background ready to help if we get any detailed questions. Pretty much gonna just do some quick intro and then get to the presentation, and we'll have questions and answers at the end. Very quick thank you to the OpenNTF sponsors. Ongoing sponsors are HCL and Prominic. They pay for things that, HCL has made a contribution that pays for things like these webinars and the licenses and the software that we use to do them. And Prominic hosts all of the OpenNTF infrastructure and offers their services on a pro bono basis. So we thank both of them to keep the community going. And speaking of the community, always interested in people making contributions. Open source is really all about, if you think it's a good idea, or even if you don't think it's a good idea, but it's something cool that you've done and you want to share it with your colleagues, this is what we do. We've got a place for you to share that stuff. We also have a place for you to come and ask questions. And if you're interested in maybe joining a larger effort to build something or fix something or document something, this is the place where you want to come and do that kind of stuff. So we welcome everybody, and we're a good bunch of people, and we like to share what we know and help others learn. So if you've got any level of interest whatsoever, please come along and join us. Quick note about upcoming events in the community. OpenNTF is continuing our monthly series, what we had originally called Repair Cafes. We're really kind of transitioning those into community hangouts. So it isn't so much about having to come and bring something that you need fixed. It's more about coming and hanging out with your friends. We've got an hour set aside on our Discord server. This will be this time slot next Thursday. And it's a monthly get-together where you can bring your questions if you want, and we actually have an in-person cameras on kind of experience. So please come and join us there. There is a DNUG event in Germany I guess that would be next week in Stuttgart. And of course, Engage is happening in just over 2 months. Quick notes about Engage. All of the sessions have been published. They've been selected. The speakers are all madly preparing their content. OpenNTF is going to have a couple of sessions at Engage. Several of us are going to be there. And we invite you to come along to Antwerp and, again, participate in the community. This is the link to our Discord server for those of you that haven't connected to us on Discord just yet. This is the right way to get into the community. There's a lot of different chat groups and forums going on about admin topics, development topics, various odd, the different tools that are part of the digital solutions portfolio. So this is the place to come and ask your questions. Next month, I found out yesterday that Darren Duke, the illustrious Darren Duke, has signed up to do some Domino security best practices. For those of you that don't know Darren Duke, he is highly, highly entertaining, pulls no punches, and is a really, really sharp guy when it comes to admin. So that will be a very strong webinar. And then in April, a close colleague of mine, Heiko Voigt, and Herwig from HCL are going to talk about Domino security and authentication in the Domino v14 world using Keycloak as an IDP for login. So that's going to be another strong presentation. And questions. I've just updated the slide. GoToWebinar has changed their UI, and so we're getting used to that. But there is a questions panel that you have access to for asking your questions as the webinar is going along. And I'll answer the first question first. Yes, this is being recorded. Let's double check that it is. Yeah, it's being recorded. So this is going to be posted on YouTube after the fact. And what we like to do is at the end of the presentation, have our questions asked and answered in the video so that they're all part of what you can later find on YouTube. So please do post your questions along the way. We won't answer them immediately, or at least most of them we won't answer immediately. Maybe the odd one we will. And most importantly, let's keep the questions on topic. Other questions, that's what Discord is for. By all means, jump in there. There's people online all day long and can answer those kinds of questions. But we ask that the questions that you asked today are specific to the webinar content. And I think with that, I will hand it over to Heather. Roberto, if you would please hand over presenter to Heather, and we'll take it from here. There we go. You should be good now, Heather. Not yet?
All right, hopefully I'm sharing and hopefully you can hear me. Can you confirm, please?
Yes.
All right, and you're seeing my screen?
Yep.
Okay, excellent, awesome. All right, so hello, welcome Yellowverse community. My name is Heather Hottenstein, and I am joined today with my HCL colleague, Matt Munse, who is an incredible person. I really enjoyed getting to know him over the last couple of months that we've been working together, and I'm really happy to have him with me here today. And what we're going to be talking about is the Domino REST API, and specifically what it means for a Domino administrator, how you can go about handling that Domino REST API in your environment. Let's start with just a little bit of information about us. So give me just 1 second. I'm just, again, this is a new UI, so I'm figuring it out. So a little bit about me. I have been a very active member of the Yellowverse community since early 1994. So I am just celebrating 30 years in this space, and I can tell you it's been an incredible ride, starting in version 3 and have seen it the whole way through to version 14. HCL, I've been at HCL almost 3 years, and here I'm a member of the sales team where I'm a technical advisor, and I believe I have one of the best jobs I've had so far in my career, where I get to talk to customers all day long about Notes and Domino and share my experience, answer their questions, and share my knowledge. So I do encourage you to please take down my email address and ping me anytime you have questions or need assistance. And Matt, you want to tell us about you?
You guys are welcome to take down my email address as well. My name is Matt Munse, as Heather just noted. I've been in the industry about 20 years or so, both doing some work with different softwares around HCL, Traveler, and some other Domino products, as well as DX. But I've got some years of development experience, and now I'm currently managing the Voltemex Go design import team, where we're doing some development there, as well as running all the level 3 support for Voltemex Go going forward. So that integrates very, very well with the Domino REST API, as that's kind of our middleware backend to get into to Domino. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to see today. So we really want to first begin by talking about what is the Domino REST API and what this has to do with you as an admin. We'll go over some of the installation procedures, what actually gets laid down when we install that, how it kind of works, some port considerations that you'll have that you'll want to make sure that you maintain in your environment, some post-installation configuration concerns that you want to have and make sure you take note of, kind of how to use it, and then a little bit where to find out some more, and then we'll entertain some questions there towards the end. So looking at a real basic diagram here of what the Domino REST API is it's a server that's kind of a middleware-ish piece. It's a server that sits in the middle between your end applications, desktop, mobile, browsers, other applications you have, and the Domino server. And what this does is it enables Domino to be able to be reached by REST calls. This is really kind of developer friendly. And helps you to be able to get into some of those things with simple REST calls rather than going through Notes clients or other means to access Domino. So we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go forward through the presentation today. So looking at what you can do with the Domino REST API, very similar to applications that you have in Notes. For example, if you have a requester that puts in a request to his organization where he has access, read writes to the subject, the description, and the cost. And he's awaiting on the approval and the remarks to come back from his approver. He can go ahead and submit that document, he or she. That approver would then have read-write access to different aspects of that particular document, which might be approval and remarks, while being able to read what they did there and actually be able to authorize that and go through. So a basic workflow from Domino, but those are the types of things that you can do, all that type of things with the Domino REST API. So it sounds kind of developer, but why would I care as an admin? Heather?
Yeah, so, exactly like Matt said, this is a development tool. And what doesn't an admin care about it? It's kind of like the designer client. It's like, yeah, I might have to use it once in a while, but for the most part, I kind of ignore it. So let me give you a little bit of history about my experience and my story about the Domino REST API. This whole narrative started a couple of years ago, and it was actually a project with the code name of Project Keep. And at the time, I was in the business partner community hearing about Project Keep, and there were webinars being presented. So I attended those webinars, and those webinars were being put on by the original developers of Project Keep, Paul Withers and Stefan Wessel, brilliant guys, and I was excited to go to these webinars and learn about it. And as I was hearing about the Domino REST API, Project Keep, and what it was doing and making this information available in Domino to anything outside of Domino, I was like, wow. And Graham mentioned Darren Duke. Darren has a saying that I'm going to politely say that this was a big deal. I could see how it was going to just change things for the Domino community and the Domino data. But then watching those webinars, I was like, okay, this is all developer stuff. So I guess it really doesn't apply to me. It's cool, and I can talk to customers about it and make connections for them, but I guess I really don't play with it. But then, as I learned more, I found out that this actually runs on the Domino server. It's an add-in server task, just like Traveler. Runs under the umbrella of the Domino server like the router, HTTP. That's my area, and that's my Domino server. They're putting something on my Domino server. It's my job to protect it. So that's, as an admin, why I care about it. It's something that I need to put on my server. I need to manage it, and I need to make sure that it doesn't affect the security or the performance of my Domino server. So let's go ahead and let's talk about how you go about getting the Domino REST API, or its acronym is known as DRAPI, on your Domino server environment. First of all, it is something that has to be added on to a Domino server, kind of like Traveler. Since Traveler's been around with like V7 of Domino, it's always been a separate download and install. And it's the same concept here. So you can get it off of FlexNet if that's where you like to go get your software. And to get it on FlexNet, when you get it logged into FlexNet on your homepage, under your My Downloads, you select HCL Domino, and then you have to find the Domino REST API in that main Domino Downloads page in the version that you're looking for. However, I'm going to tell you about the new HCL software download site, which is that first URL on the page, and it's also that QR code that I have listed there. This is a great new download website, and I'm actually going to go out for a moment here, and I'm going to show you the new download website. So give me just 1 second for my computer to go there. There we go, and we'll go to the download portal. Here I am after I've logged in. This is what it looks like. And right here, I've got all my main HCL products. I want Domino. I go ahead and I scroll down through this page. Tools, connectors, integrators, Domino REST API. And right here, not only is it easy peasy to get to this, but right here, this is my favorite part. I have a list of every version of the Domino REST API that's come out. Domino REST API, as you can see in 1.0, first officially shipped in November of 2022. And since then, there have been 9 releases. It's on a pretty fast cadence cycle. A lot of exciting stuff. There's a lot of innovation and commitment to putting everything into the REST API. So I always will say, unless you have a specific reason to go with an older version, you want to go with the latest and greatest. So when you click on the latest and greatest, you then have some options of what you want to download and how you want to run it. So the Domino REST API currently is supported to run on Domino running as a container. That's Docker or Kubernetes, and that is going to be your Docker images, where you then can download this and add it to your images to run your containers. You also have the ability to run the Domino REST API on the Windows and Linux Domino servers. And that is going to be the multi-platform installer. And that is going to be an install file that you can install. You can use that to install on both Linux and Domino, or Linux and Windows Domino servers. In addition, you'll see here that for the different install types or download types, both Docker and multi-platform, that there are versions. So you need to be cognizant of what version of Domino is running on the server, whether it's 12 or 14. And the reason that there are two different download options is because in version 14, HCL made some significant changes to the Domino or to the Java that's part of the Domino server. So that's why there's a difference there.
And as you said just a moment ago, Heather, there's a number of different releases that are there. We try to have a release almost on about a monthly basis. So you'll want to go back here and make sure that you're at the current release versions. Make sure that you have all the latest and greatest nifty features.
Absolutely, that's a great point. And then also, you know, part of this new HCL download portal is with V14, you can actually get notifications when new things are posted, and you can also have that code automatically downloaded to your Domino server. So if you don't already have a V14 server in your environment, you definitely want to get one so you can start using that new auto update feature. So let's go back to the Domino REST API, and that with regards to downloading the software, and I'm actually going to specifically talk about Domino and Windows. Okay, so the Domino server and the Domino REST API is all on a Windows server, and I'm going to do that because one, that's my experience, that's what I've worked with the most, and also most of my customers are actually using Windows and Domino together. So when you download the multi-platform installer, what comes down is a file that has a tar.gz extension. All right, and so I know Linux people, they're like, yeah, tar.gz, I know what that is. Well, somebody that's traditionally a Windows Domino administrator, tar.gz is foreign, it's alien, and it's like, what is that? So first time I downloaded Domino REST API when it was back in, beta, I saw the tar.gz. What the heck is that? Did my Google search, found out, oh, it's just a compressed zip file. Okay, well, what do I do with it? And I found out that there are programs that you can download to unzip it or uncompress it. And so I found one tool called 7-Zip that I like because it's free and it's easy to use, and it allows you to extract the contents of the tar.gz. Now, one thing I want to mention about the tar.gz or the 7-Zip tool is that if you do decide to use it to extract a tar.gz, you will need to actually run it twice. The first time you run 7-Zip against the tar.gz file, and it extracts out a tar file. And then you need to basically, against that tar file, run 7-Zip again to extract out the actual jar install file. And then I recently learned about a month ago from my colleague Casey Toole, who's been in the Domino community for a really long time, that on the Windows platform, there is a tar executable. And so from a Windows command prompt, you can run the tar command that I have listed here with the correct parameters of -xvzf. You mention the name of the file that you have downloaded, and then using the minus, and this is case sensitive, capital C, you say where you want that install file to be placed. And it's going to go ahead and extract it. And then in, like I have here listed, my Domino program folder of C Domino, it is going to copy REST API install -r14.jar. So I now have my install file available for me to use. So now on the Windows platform, in order to install the REST API install jar file, I need to use, again, the Windows command prompt, and I need to run it as an administrator. And just as a sidebar here, I know Windows people, they're going, why am I having to use a command prompt? I want a UI. And believe me, I get that. UIs are nice, they're easy to use. I don't always like to type either. Totally get that. But the reason that it is a Windows command prompt install is because HCL wanted this to be consistent with both the Windows and Linux platform. So that's why we're doing this through a command line interface. So in order to install the REST API using that REST API jar file, you need to run a command. And you're going to run specifically a Java executable and then a bunch of parameters that you provide. And I have those parameters listed here. So don't let your head explode. I'm now going to explain what each of these mean. So we first have, of course, we're running a Java executable, and we're calling the -jar parameter. And now the name and path of my jar file that's going to actually have my install binary information. The -d is the first parameter that I then have, and that specific parameter is for the Domino data folder. Now, I have it listed here in double quotes. The double quotes are optional unless you have a space in your folder names. So like if you have Domino installed in C program space files /domino/data, then you will definitely need those double quotes. The next parameter, -i, is how you define the file path and name of the notes.ini. -r is going to be the file path for the Domino REST API library files. So when you install this, it's going to lay down some library files on your Domino server, and it wants to put those in the Domino program folder, and by default, the name is REST API. So unless you have a true reason of changing that, my recommendation is to call that folder REST API. -p is the Domino program directory. So again, I'm specifying the drive and the file or the folder of my Domino program, in this case, cdomino. And then finally, I specify or I list -a to say, yes, I'm accepting everything that I've listed here. Now, one tech tip that I want to share with you that I learned on my journey here is that because you need to run a Java executable, you can do that in a variety of ways. You can, of course, install Java on your Domino server, go and get like IBM's Java and put it on your Domino server. Or you can put the Domino program directory in your Windows path statement, and then from any place in your Windows command prompt, wherever you are, you can go ahead and run this command. Or what I have found works best for me is I actually change directories to C Domino Java bin, and then from that folder I have available to me Domino's Java executable. So right there, I'm in that folder, I run this command, it runs, it does everything I need it to do, and I haven't needed to make any configuration changes or install anything additional on my Domino server. So Matt, you want to tell us about what gets laid down on that Domino server as part of the install?
Sure. Not a ton of things, but we'll just kind of walk through them real quick. Obviously, as you said before, with that -r parameter is where the Domino REST API folder with some of those different binaries are contained. And so that's in the Domino REST API folder that's there, containing those jar files and things that we use to run the application. We also grab an executable, especially for Windows.exe, but it's the nREST API. This is actually what's run on the server tasks for Domino. We have a program debug database as well, nREST API.pdb, and this is also laid down as well inside of the Domino directory there. We do a couple of things for notes.ini updates. We add the server tasks of REST API to the end of your server tasks line. So we don't obstruct anything that's there, we just pop it on to the end so that runs on startup. There is a keep install directory, which again is where we installed and laid down a lot of the binaries for the REST API jar files. So that's the Domino REST API. And then there's the keep management URL. This is needed for the Domino task to really kind of discuss with the Java side of Domino and the REST APIs. Some of these things are subject to change. We're making modifications. As I said a moment ago, almost on a monthly basis, we're popping out releases. So just keep your eyes peeled if some of these things happen to be updated. Last thing,
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Matt, that just means we need to do another webinar, right?
I would guess so. Yeah. Then we laid down 3 different databases. The main database that's used that we really are concerned about is the keepconfig.nsf. This holds all of our scopes and schemas information, which we'll talk about in just a minute, kind of how that's configured inside of the Domino REST API. But this is a very important database for us. We also have the keepagents.nsf, which kind of keeps track of where agents are when they're running on a particular server for an application that's being done there. Then there's also the OAuth.nsf. We'll talk a little bit more about OAuth and how that's actually done for authorization. But one thing to keep in mind and be pretty vigilant about is if you have a clustered environment, you need to have keepconfig.nsf and OAuth.nsf replicated across those cluster members.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. So as Matt said, the Domino REST API is a server task, and it's called REST API. It gets added to the server tasks line so that every time Domino starts, REST API also loads on the Domino server. And just like other Domino tasks that run on your Domino server, you can interact with it. I have here on the screen tell REST API help, which is a great starting point because it gives you an output of the other commands that are available when using the Domino REST API. So one of my favorites here, and I'm going to show this to you real quick, is tell REST API status because it gives me an output of what my Domino REST API is doing. So here, if I do tell REST API status, gives me an output of, for example, the fact that what version of REST API I'm running, and also what I really like here is the runtime. Has it been consistently running, or has it had issues? So really like that piece. Also, just like other things on your Domino server, sometimes when you make changes, you need to refresh the Domino server in order for that to change or for that to take effect. And you're going to learn that as we talk today. Like when you make a configuration change on the Domino REST API, you need to do a reload of the REST API task in order for it to take effect. And you have tell REST API reload. So it basically reloads everything in the Domino REST API configuration, but your Domino server has stayed up and running. So it's minimal disruption to your user community. So Matt, do you want to tell us about how the Domino REST API works?
So when the Domino REST API jar executable is running on the server and that task has been started, there's certain ways that we manage that task and work in some information for that. So the way that some of those environment variables and those variables are laid out that we kind of define how it works are kind of done in this priority manner. Begin with the keep information there and the config.json and security.json files within the program directory files where the jar files are. And then we really read more so on the keepconfig.d directory. So this particular directory is where you do most of your configurations and enabling different things for parameters being read. This is all being done and manipulated with JSON files. We'll get into JSON files. I know that many Domino administrators aren't necessarily familiar with them, but then on top of that are the environment variables. So this is the order of priority that these things are laid down. As we see here in this diagram, there's multiple JSON files. That's not necessarily needed. You can have everything in one big JSON file, which may be easier for you to manage. You can separate things by comments and be able to search in that single JSON file rather than have to go through multiples. You want to make sure that you don't overwrite variables that are from A that are in C and things like that. So kind of a point of preference, but that's kind of how it would work for configuring the server itself.
Right. And, Matt, I completely agree with you that having all of your custom configuration in one JSON can be helpful. Exactly like you said, it can be commented and you have everything like one-stop shopping. But me personally, I actually like to take a modular type of point of view of it, where I like to have separate JSONs for each piece of my configuration. It's just for me, my way of thinking, it's easier to organize. So as a Domino administrator, you're going to have to determine what works best for you. HCL supports first, so do what works best in your environment. So as Matt explained in the beginning of this presentation, the Domino REST API is a way of making Domino data available to anything outside of Domino that can speak HTTP. And just like anything that's sitting out there on the World Wide Web or on the public internet, it has a number of ports. So the ports around the Domino REST API that you need to specifically know about so you can configure your routers and firewalls correctly are 4 ports. We first have the data port, and that is going to be port 8880. And the data port is used for accessing Domino data through the REST API. So for example, on a system outside of Domino, I need to get to a Domino document and its fields and that data. I'm going to use port 8880. Now, when you're logging in using port 8880, you actually are going to be using the information in the person document. That's going to be your username and internet password. For health check, that is on port 8886, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It allows you to use a health endpoint and verify whether or not the Domino REST API is up. Now, something about the health check port and the other 2 ports that I'm going to talk about here in a moment is that in order to log in to those interfaces, you need to create what's known as a functional account. And I'm going to actually talk about functional accounts here in a moment. So don't worry, I'm going to show you how you set those up and how they work. But ultimately also, these health check, management, and Prometheus ports and their respective functional accounts, they don't have access to each other. So you will need to set up separate functional accounts. For the management port, which is 8889, that to me is the one that I interact with a fair amount of time as a Domino administrator, because that allows me to do some types of the configuration. I can also see information about the Domino REST API, like the log files. I have another access point for stopping and starting the Domino REST API. And because it is such a powerful utility and gives you that level of access, it is recommended that that port be blocked from access outside of the local host. That means that, like, for example, on a Linux server, you're going to do a secure shell into your Linux server and then from there connect to port 8889. Or on a Windows server, you'll connect via RDP and then go to the management port on 8889. And then finally, the Prometheus port of 8890 is a way of providing metrics in Prometheus format. From there, you can take that and you can ingest it into Grafana to actually have graphical representation of those metrics. If anybody here is a same-time administrator, that ability has been available on same-time, and you may have already done some of this. Graphical representation of the ports that I've just discussed. You can see how a user comes in here on the right-hand side over secure port 443 on HTTPS. And sitting in front of the Domino server and the Domino REST API is an Nginx proxy server. So Nginx is taking this request and saying, okay, what do I need to do with it? And for anything that's either for port 81 or port 8880 for the Domino REST API data port, it passes it over to the Domino server. So you can see here the original request from the user to the server, that traffic is over 443. It's going to be secure HTTP. The traffic on the internal network between the Nginx proxy server and the Domino server on the Domino REST API is on HTTP, not encrypted. What I want to point out here about this is a few minutes ago, Matt mentioned a notes INI variable. Okay, it was the keep management URL. And by default, that has a value of HTTP. If you decide you actually want HTTPS to terminate on the Domino server, meaning the traffic between the proxy server and the Domino REST API is happening over HTTPS, then that keep management URL needs to be changed to have HTTPS in its parameter name. We also talked about a moment ago the management console. And here you can see an admin on the left-hand side doing a secure shell into the server using a command or a request over port 8889, and here they're getting to the Domino REST API management console. Now, another thing that I want to point out, and to me this was like a light bulb moment going off in my head when I learned this, is the Domino REST API. It does not use Domino's HTTP stack. In fact, you can shut down Domino's HTTP, doing a tell HTTP quit on your Domino server, and the Domino REST API will continue to completely function. In addition, the Domino REST API does not use the HTTP TLS cache. So like in Domino 12, where HCL introduced Certificate Manager, and you have the Cert Manager task on the Domino server with the TLS cache, Domino REST API does not currently use that. I do believe it's in the roadmap to bring it in. It's just not there yet. All right, so let's go ahead now and let's talk about the configuration of the Domino REST API. And I like to talk about this in terms of, like, for example, it's really easy to install a Domino server. You know, you go, you run the executable, you click through a couple of screens, and boom, you got a Domino server. No, you really don't. Or another good example here is I already have a Domino server, and I go ahead and I do load HTTP. I've got a web server. Yeah, you do, but yeah, you really don't. You still have configuration you need to do. And so that's the same thing here with the Domino REST API. By just simply installing the REST API and having it loaded on your Domino server, yeah, the REST API is sitting there, but by default, it's completely locked down and you can't do anything with it until you do some configuration, both with regards to the Domino REST API and your Domino applications and data. So the first thing I want to talk about in terms of that configuration is functional accounts. As I said, management, health, and Prometheus ports need a functional account in order for them to be accessed. Now, a functional account, just like other things in the Domino REST API, they are going to be configured using a JSON file. And a JSON file is just a text file. You can create and modify JSONs using, like in Windows, Notepad or Notepad++. Very easy to use or configure. However, they can be a little tricky in that they are space sensitive, very sensitive to spacing, and they also are case sensitive. So we have an online Domino REST API help document, which is tremendously helpful. I am almost in it every single day. I have learned so much using it, and there are so many examples provided. Like, for example, this text here that I have on the right-hand side, that is a functional account JSON, and it is an exact copy-paste from what is available in the online documentation. So I recommend to you, as you're installing the REST API and configuring it, please go to the documentation. Copy-paste is your friend in these situations. So specifically, this JSON, it is defining the management functional account. And you can see that here in that for the identity parameter, I have management API. What follows next, you'll see the value of Dr. Notes. Okay, now that is the username that we're providing by default. As you copy this and paste it into a Notepad file in your environment, you can change that if you want to. And you can make it your own name. You can call it Notes Admin. However, just keep in mind that username is case sensitive, meaning when you go to the management port 8889 to log in, you're going to use this username and you need to enter it in the same case that it's defined in the JSON. And then finally, the secret. That is actually, I know it looks like a bunch of gobbledygook, but it is the password that you use to log into, like in this case, the management console or into the management functional account using the username of Dr. Notes, and then you define or you're going to list a password. But don't worry, you don't have to list all that stuff. You're going to just actually type what your password is. It's just basically salted or hashed into this hexadecimal string. Now, the first time you're setting this up, like for the management console, you're going to actually use the value that is in the help file. And that is the value you see here on the screen. It's actually the salted password for the value of password. So yes, you're initially setting this up with a password, but I'm going to show you here in a moment how you change that so you can very quickly get rid of that password of password. And then once you save this, so you've created your document using Notepad on your Windows server, you're then going to go ahead and save it to the Keep Config D folder, because all custom configuration files, all those JSONs, get placed into that Keep Config D. So let's go ahead and actually take a look at that management console. I'm going to go ahead and go to a VM that I have. So VM is right here. And I have if I do a show server, you'll see that this server is called Rock Adventure, and it is running Domino 14. And in the previous command I entered was showing the status of the Domino REST API. You saw that I was running Domino REST API 1.09, which is the latest and greatest shipping version. So to get to the management console using the management functional account, I need to use a web browser. So here I'm going to go to Chrome, and typically on your Domino server, you would access it using the URL of your Domino server, the host name, and then port 8889. Because this is a test server and I haven't configured DNS and all that stuff, I'm just going to use localhost of 127.0.0.1, and then of course defining the port of 8889. And as you can see here, it's giving me a login. That has nothing to do with anything that goes on in my Domino directory. This is, again, that login that I defined in the functional account that I just created. So I'm going to go ahead here and put in my username of Dr. Notes, again, carefully defining the proper case with capital D and capital N. And then for the password, I'm going to go ahead and put in my password. And I sign in. This is the management console, and this allows you to do some configuration against the Domino REST API. It also allows you to see things like logs, configuration information. You can even interact with the Domino server console. So you have some ways of doing some things against your Domino server. Yes, you can use the console that's on your Domino server, or you can use the one that's in your admin client. Sorry about that. This is just another way that you can get to your console. So let's first talk about that password, because like I said, you're going to copy that management functional account JSON text out of the help document. You're going to create your JSON and reload HTTP, and then get into your management console using a password. And yeah, that's just not a good idea, even for a test environment, right? So we want to change that. So the way we change that is we enter a value into salt this. Like, for example, I'm going to type in new password. Okay? And I press the salt button. I get an output of some more gobbledygook. Again, it's just a hex representation, hex hash representation of new password. So that means that what I need to do is I'm going to copy this text. Okay? I'm going to go to my Domino servers, Keep Config D folder, and here in my functional users JSON, yes, I want to use that. Hello, use that. And here I have the secret. So what I can do is I take the secret value, I paste over it, I do a file save, a file exit, And then after I reload the Domino REST API, my password is now going to be new password. It's easy as that to change your password. So again, I highly recommend you change that password immediately. Now, some other things, like I said, you can do is you can look at log files. So, and I also want to point out that these buttons are a little sensitive. Like I'm here off here to the side with my cursor right next to the text logs, and I click, nothing happens. If I click on logs, I am now seeing the same thing that I would see on my Domino servers IBM technical support folder. So yes, I can look at console logs, I can look at NSDs if I had any, and I also have here a bunch of Domino keep files or keep logs. And you can look at them. You can see they have time date stamps. So you can get very granular in terms of what you're looking at. Also, I'm going to scroll down here. Come on, I've got a lot. You can tell the server's been up and running for a little while, right? I also have a Domino Keep Credentials log. That's going to have information about the Domino REST API and who has been logging into it, or if there was a problem with the login, it's going to tell me about that. In a similar fashion, let me go ahead and open up one of these Domino Keep logs for you. It's just giving you some information about what the Domino REST API has been doing, who's been logging in, and what type of data have they been accessing. So, from an administration perspective, knowing about these logs, either for just general review of your Domino server, or especially when you're trying to troubleshoot an issue, definitely keep these in mind as a way of getting information about what's happening. Alrighty, so Domino Management Console, like I said, a really big thing to know about in terms of managing your Domino REST API. So now let's go back to the presentation. Give me a moment here. There we go. Alrighty, so now Java Web Tokens. Matt, you want to tell us a little bit about web tokens?
Yeah, take a break, Heather. You've been talking.
Thank you.
So when you log into the Domino REST API, you actually log into Domino. As was noted before, you're going to log in with credentials that are based on your person documents. So you're logging into Domino, not something necessarily specific that's different from the Domino REST API. And so when you make that query into Domino, you're passing those credentials to the Domino server. And Domino server is going to honor your access control levels, your groups, your users, all of those different kinds of things in relation to your documents and applications. Once that authorization has been done on Domino, we pass back a JWT bearer token back through the Domino REST API. That's what we kind of use to reference where you are and who you are in your conversations going back and forth between your end application through the Domino REST API and talking back to the Domino server itself. So that's kind of how the authentication authorization works for you.
Awesome. So with regards to that JWT that Matt just talked through the flow, it does work by default. And by default, though, it is doing a random, or excuse me, it generates a random JSON web token every time there's an authentication. So what that means is that that token is not being shared across Domino servers. And similar to HTTP, anybody who's ever managed Domino HTTP on multiple Domino servers, I have a user, they come to server A from a web browser and they log in. They now need to access data on server B. Same web browser, same tab, they access that secondary Domino server, server B, they get prompted for more credentials. Same credentials, but they have to add them again. And nothing irritates an end user more than having to enter credentials over and over and over. And the same thing applies here to the Java Web Token. So, just like with HTTP, and you can create an LTPA token, and that's then shared across Domino servers, and users don't have to enter in their credentials every time they're hitting a new element, you can do the same thing with JWT. So the way that we do that with the Domino REST API is, again, back on that management console. And on the management console, you have a field called certificate name. And this certificate name It doesn't have anything to do with your HTTP or TLS certificates. It has nothing to do with your domain name. You can make it whatever you want. Now, I'm going to say most people are probably going to make it some variation of their company's name or server name or Domino domain name, excuse me. But you can use whatever value you want. So in this case here, because I'm Rock Adventure and my domain's Adventure, I went ahead and I made it Adventure Company. And I clicked the Create IDP Certificate button on the Management Console. When I do that, it gives me output. It says Created Adventure Company. What it's actually done in the back end is it's created 4 files. And those files are a certificate, a public-private key pair, and another JSON configuration file. So with those 4 files, I then can take them and place them on another Domino server that is also running the Domino REST API. And that now means after I reload the Domino REST API on both of those Domino servers, I now can share that JWT between the two. The other thing that a permanent Java Web Token does for you is it allows you to accept JWTs from external providers. So if you have a use case that involves that, you'll want to take these steps as well. So also, as Matt mentioned earlier, we have the ability to be part of an OAuth application with the Domino REST API. Now, OAuth within the Domino REST API can be configured or can be considered an optional step. And that's because really you can use the Domino REST API without ever using OAuth authentication. However, based on your use case and what you're looking to do with the Domino REST API, or rather what your developers and users are wanting to do with the Domino REST API, you might need to set this up. Great use case is with Volt MX Go, which is another HCL offering. If you have decided that you want to use Volt MX Go as a way of extending the landscape of your Domino data, then you will need to do OAuth setup on your Domino servers, or excuse me, on your Domino REST API. So the way you're going to do that configuration of the Domino REST API on your Domino servers is, first of all, you need to make a small ACL update on that OAuth database, and then you also need to create a JSON file. So let me take a moment here, and I'm going to show you in my Domino admin client what ACL change you need to make. So again, this is my Domino test server, Rock Adventure, and here is my Domino Keep OAuth database. Just like any database, I go to the Access Control option and manage it. Take a moment. And what I need to do is I need to take the explicit entry from my Domino server and I need to add it to the OAuth admin role. So there, I now have enabled this I've now enabled my Domino REST API to be part of an OAuth flow, or actually I've done the first step of 2 of what I need to do. The second step I need to do is I need to create a JSON file. Now again, this JSON, there is a variable of it or a variety of it that's available in the online documentation. So again, copy and paste is your friend. Biggest thing that you're going to want to modify as you're placing this on your Domino server in the keep config D folder is the URL of your Domino server. So you're going to want to make sure that you define that of your Domino server so that it appropriately responds. But once you have these 2 things in place and you do a reload of the REST API task, now the Domino REST API is ready to be part of that OAuth dance. So finally, like Matt mentioned as well, there are 3 databases that get created on the Domino server, okay? Those 3 databases are added, and you as an administrator need to manage those databases. In those database ACLs, there is a group added called Local Keep Admins. It's in the ACL, but yet there is not yet a group in the Domino directory called Local Keep Admins. So as a post configuration step, what you're going to want to do is create that group. So just like anything in your Domino directory, you're going to go in using either directly into names.nsf or using your admin client on the People and Groups tab, click Create New Group, and create a new group that's going to look something like what I have listed here on the right-hand side. The group name is going to be Local Keep Admins, all one word. And for best practices, you want to define that as an access control list only group, unless you want to send mail to it as well, and then you could make it multi-purpose. The members of this group are those individuals that are managing the Domino REST API. So you'll set your membership based on the people in your environment and who you want to give this rights to. Now, the other thing about these three databases is they all have their own ACLs. And I did just talk about a little bit about the OAuth NSF and a small change that needs to be made as part of the OAuth configuration. But in terms of what the REST API requires and also security best practices, I want to touch on those three databases. So let's actually go back over to my admin client, and I'm going to first discuss the Keep Agent database. So on Keep Agents NSF, again, I select Access Control Manage. And here is the default ACL that gets created as part of the creation of the database. Now, the default access here is initially listed as reader. If you and your environment prefer for the default access of a database to be no access, for this database, you can change that default access to no access. Also, the local keep admins group, that does indeed need to be editor. So it is editor by default. You're going to need to keep that as editor unless you have a need to take that to a higher value. You can also change, if you need to, the default for local domain admins, like if you have an administration group that has a different value. You can also change your local domain servers, other domain servers groups, again, for your environment. And then as a best practice, what I like to do is I like to go to advanced, and I like to set my server as the administration server. So that way, I now have a complete admin P flow happening against this database if any ACL entries are updated, like through a group name change. Alrighty, so now let's talk about that OAuth database again. So go back to its ACL. And here, with this OAuth database, you're going to see here the default access is author. Now, I know the security best practice that I follow, and probably a lot of you follow, is default should be no access. Well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but in this case, this database does require default to be author. Now, however, you don't need to enable these flags, like the delete documents flag can indeed remain disabled. But the reason that it needs to be a default of author access, it's so that your users can basically deactivate their OAuth tokens. Now, in addition, you have your server again, and I like to do my best practice of taking my server and making it the administration server. So that now, yes, I have that key icon, and it will be part of an admin P ACL update flow. All right, finally, the Keep Config database, which that's a pretty important database, and we're going to be talking about that here a little bit more in a few moments. But if I go to my access control, sorry, it ran away from me for a moment. And in this ACL, all right, first of all, you're going to see here that the default is reader. And once again, I need to tell you that that default does indeed need to stay as a reader, all right? Also, local keep admins, default as editor, needs to stay as editor. The only reason that you would want to change the local keep admins access is, again, if you have a use case to make it higher. A specific use case, again, VoltMX Go. If you are looking at having VoltMX Go in your environment, having data from Domino databases served up through the REST API and being able to be interacted with from a VoltMX Go application, local keep admins needs to then be designer at a minimum, so designer or manager. I like to give them designer because I never like to go higher than that if I don't have to. And then finally, again, my Domino server, I'm going to set it as an administration server. All right, and I save that off. So there I go. I have now done ACL configuration against these databases. Now, as most of you probably know, most Domino databases, or actually all Domino databases and Domino design elements, have a signature on them. It's the ID of whoever created that, modified that design element, or who actually last signed the database. So these databases have come to you with a signature on them that is that of HCL's development team. So we want to make that actually our signature for our specific Domino environment. So you can do them one at a time, or you can select all three by holding down the Shift key and selecting them, and then using the sign option. And here you want to follow the best practices or the protocols that you follow within your Domino environment, whether you're using a signing ID, a specific signing ID, or using the current server's ID. And there, I now have successfully prepared my 3 Domino databases for my Domino environment and the Domino REST API on my Domino server. So Matt, you want to talk a little bit about how we go about now making data and Domino databases available through the Domino REST API?
Me too. So there's a couple of different things that are done when you're setting up your different applications inside the Domino REST API. So if you can look at these with different actual kind of roles being done with what's being accessed here. So the customer is going to come in, or the user is going to come in with a particular requirement that needs to be done and what needs to be accessed, the data that they need to have, and even some of the levels of access to that particular application or different particular fields or forms or views inside of that. So that developer would come in and actually create a schema inside of the Domino REST API. We're going to go through this in a little bit so you can kind of see what that means. But that schema allows for them to pick forms, views, and agents, and then different fields and even attributes to those particular things on an application in an NSF file. There can be multiple schemas per NSF. And they can define different kind of roles that each person coming in there, whether it's a user or an administrator. As we saw in the very beginning, there was a requester, and then there was an approver, in that kind of workflow of how that document kind of life cycle happened in Domino. So something like that can be set up here. Now, in order to have access to those schemas, the administrator would be able to manage the scopes that we have there. So those scopes, which is we have here in the green called enable keep schemas. You can have multiple scopes as well per schema, defining different levels of users and groups that you have that are accessing that as well. Then the final piece here is that OAuth application. And so what the OAuth application basically does is it has a client ID and a secret, and it allows for an application to come in and be able to securely access this particular applications that we have on the Domino REST API. That gives you kind of a tunnel into being able to look into those different scopes and see those different schemas. We can look at it a little bit deeper on the next slide here. Very similar to what I said, you can have multiple schemas per application. As we see here, one of the schemas off to the right has the different agents and views and forms. The forms can have different modes to them. We have a default form, we have a DQL form, we got OData forms. That allows for you to be able to access that data based on whatever endpoint it is that your application is that's retrieving and interacting with Domino. And then you can make different specifications on the particular fields inside of those individual forms. So there's a lot of granularity that you have and power inside of the Domino REST API. And again, at the bottom here, we have multiple different scopes per those schemas. So different scopes can be done, different access levels can be given within individual scopes per schemas, and then those scopes are accessed via the OAuth application. So that's how there's the kind of the complete flow of a end user coming in through an OAuth application. They go into the scope based on the schema definition. They have access to your NSF.
Right. Yeah. And so, Matt, just as a Domino admin, just a couple of points I want to interject there, please. First of all, going back to this slide, I want to point out the fact that you see here on the left the characters, and we have developers and administrators listed. Okay. And I know, I like to work with my Domino developers. I want to be their friend. I want to work successfully with them because ultimately we just want our customers to be able to use their Domino applications. I don't want there to be, any type of fighting between the two. So hopefully you already have that good relationship, but, just like, taking Domino databases from a development environment into a production environment and working successfully with your Domino developer, as an administrator, you're going to do the same thing here with the Domino REST API. It is a joint adventure with your developers. Okay? Also, like Matt pointed out, this is very secure. And in fact, by default, nothing is available through the Domino REST API. Your Domino databases, their design elements, their fields, their data cannot be accessed through the Domino REST API until you and your developer work together to expose what specific data you want to make available through the Domino REST API.
Exactly right.
Yeah, thank you. So let's go ahead now and let's talk about how we create a schema, a scope, and if needed, an OAuth application. Just like I talked about also previously, that OAuth application and OAuth being potentially an optional step for you based on your use case, the OAuth application here is as well. Again, an example of a use case where you would need to create an OAuth application as part of this flow is if you are looking at exposing this data using VoltMX Go. So what I would like to do now is I would like to go back to show and tell, since I think that tells the story a little bit better here. So I'm going to go back to my VM. I have my Domino server, and on my Domino server, I have a database. So let me show you this database. In my data folder, I have a database. Oh, come on, sorry. There we go. I have a database, demo.nsf. Okay, I want to point out that this demo NSF database, it's a database that contains customer and marketing material. Okay, it's just a bunch of text documents for the most part, and it is a database that's available for download as part of that online Domino REST API documentation. So it's a great database to get in your environment so you can play around with this and not worry about, having your databases initially being potentially accessed. And like I said, there's lots of data in there. You don't even have to create the test data. So, but with this demo database, I'm going to show you the flow. So again, I need to go to my web browser. And now this time in my web browser, again, in your production environment, you're going to be using a host name, but I'm going to use the local 127.0.0.1, and I'm going to use that Domino REST API data port of 8880. Now, when I come in, I initially see this as my landing page, okay? And you can see it says, I am using version 109. And I have some default cards available to me. And if I had created OAuth applications, I would see them here. Now, with regards to these cards, Graham, in the beginning of our presentation, actually talked about the Digital Solutions Discord channel. And I want to point out that right here is another way of getting access. So if, for some reason you didn't follow what Graham said or you can't find it, this is another place. By clicking here, you can get into the Discord channel to get help about anything Domino. So whether it's a Domino admin question, an X-Pages question, a Domino designer question, or a Domino REST API assistance that you need, you can find it here. So we're going to talk about the configuration. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on the configuration card. First thing it does, it says, you need to authenticate to log in. All right, so here, in order to log in, this is going to be the username and password that is part of my person document. So in this case, this is a test environment. I'm going to enter in Dr. Notes, my user. It's not case sensitive. I'm just doing that because that's me. And then the password that I have for Dr. Notes. Now, one little trivia fact that I want to tell you all about, because I think this is fascinating, is the picture you see here on the right-hand side. That is actually Johannesburg Palace. That's located in Aschaffenburg, Germany. And Note Sensei, who is Stefan Wessel and was one of the original creators of Project Keep, that's his original hometown. And he actually took that picture. So I love that piece of trivia and just how it ties into the whole REST API story. All right, so let's go ahead and log in. And here you now have what's known as the REST API admin UI. So from here on, if you hear me reference admin UI, this is what I'm talking about. And in the admin UI, I want to go ahead and I want to create the schema, the scope, and the OAuth application. So you will see here, there is a quick config button, and as you get used to the Domino REST API, you may decide to use the quick config button, and that's totally acceptable. But for today, because I want to actually walk you through how each one looks, I'm going to go ahead and do that individually. So let's go ahead and let's start with the schema. Schema here is this little icon that looks like a couple of lines, and you can see right now I don't have any schemas because I just installed this. I haven't done anything yet, so nothing's available. So I'm going to go ahead and use the Add Schema button. And I want to right now create a brand new schema. I'll come back in a few moments and talk about the import option you see here. So when I create a new schema, I have to first say, okay, well, what database do I want to expose? And you see a list of databases here. One thing I want to point out is you, by default, do not see any templates or what are known as system files, like, for example, the names.nsf database. If you need to expose, like, for example, names.nsf, that is an additional configuration step you need to take, again, using a JSON configuration. And there is information in the online Domino REST API help documentation that will show you how to do that. So just keep that in mind. So that when you do not see a database in here, you don't freak out, you can get it in there. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and select my demo database. And you have here the option to click an icon or to change the icon if you want. I find this to be useful in that you're going to see as we go through this, the schema, the scope, and the application each have their own card. And so I like to have the icon match those three cards so that when I'm looking through these pages, I can very easily graphically find exactly which one I'm looking for. So in this case, since it's a demo database and it's got customers, I want them to buy stuff, so I'm going to use the shopping cart icon. The schema name, this is going to be in all lowercase, and it cannot have spaces. So I'm going to go, and it has to also be unique. So as you start creating things in your environment, you're going to want to create some type of standard of how you name schema, scopes, and OAuth applications in your environment. Just like you right now create, have standards for database names, database file names, folders, things like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and call this demo, and then I'm just going to call it demo stuff. And the formula language, yes, it's a drop-down, but you only have the option of Domino. So we go ahead and save the schema. Where's my card? Why is it not showing up? Don't freak out. I have here a little toggle switch that right now is on. By clicking it to off, I see the demo card. And the reason it wasn't showing with the toggle switch turned on is because currently I don't have a scope yet defined. Once I define the scope, then it would show up. So I now have that. Going back into it, because yes, I created the schema, but as you saw in the previous slides with Matt, you have to actually specify which design elements you want to expose. And those design elements are forms, views, and agents. So here, for this example, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the marketing form. And all I have to do is click Activate. And boom, that form is now part of my schema. I have to add fields. So I go to Edit It, and I can add information here. I can either click on the individual fields that I want to add, or I can use this button here and it says Add All Fields. So especially for a form that has a couple hundred fields and you want to add them all, trust me, Add All is your friend. Also, by default access, you do not have deletion rights. So if you need to be able to delete, you're going to want to edit this and change that to an @true value. Whoops, @true. And I also want to show you here that once you've added a field into the schema, you can even get more granular control from a security perspective in terms of controlling what specifically can be done through the Domino REST API. Like here I can do, complete CRUD activities of read and write, or I can do just read or write only. I go ahead and save that. Now, when I save it, I always am going to have initially what's known as the default mode. And like Matt said, you can have multiple modes, and that's going to be based on what type of endpoints are you looking to come in to get this Domino data. Like, for example, is it OData? So you have to create an OData mode. But in the case of like VoltMX Go, you need to create what's known as a DQL mode. And to create that DQL mode, I can either use the Add Mode button and redefine everything that I just did, or I can use the Clone Mode button. Believe me, this one is definitely your friend. So you click Clone Mode, you say, okay, I want this to be DQL, I click Save, and boom, I now have for the marketing form, all of the fields, all of the security specifications all copied right over for me. All right, so now let's talk about the views and how we go ahead and expose them. So we go to Database Views, and here I want to expose the $all view. I also want to expose its column data or its columns. So I'll go ahead and expose those and do save. So I have that as part of the collection, the document collection the REST API can go to. If I want to do some agents, I can also do that. Okay. And with views and agents, I do want to point out that those automatically get saved for you. It's only when you actually go into a form and you're specifying fields, you have to take that extra step of pressing the save button. So now that I have a schema available to me, and I've got two modes, I now need to go ahead to the next step, which is actually making that available. And that is being done by creating a scope. It's available here on the left-hand side. It looks kind of like a donut icon, probably because I haven't had breakfast yet. I'm thinking of donuts. And I go over here and I click Add Scope. And what I see here, I have only created one. I'm seeing a duplicate right now. I think it's because I was playing with this a little bit ago and it's cached something in my browser. That's okay. Don't worry about that. But we'll go ahead and click it. And then I have to give it some information. And again, this has to be unique. So you're going to want naming standards for your scope name. Description, demo samples, fine. My server, I have to select the server where the Domino REST API has this database. And that's actually, I don't think we talked about this. Real quick point about the Domino REST API is that the database that you're looking to expose has to be local to the Domino server where the Domino REST API is running. It's just like the router task. In order for the router to deliver an email message, it has to be local to the server. Same thing like HTTP serving out. Maximum access level, does not overwrite the ACL. It does not get added to the ACL. It's just saying what is the maximum access to the data collection through the REST API. And then, of course, I can again change my icon and add that. Finally, I have my application that I'm setting up for an OAuth app. And I'm just going to go ahead real quick here and set up demo and demo DB. The callback URL. The callback URL. Oh, I actually copy pasted something else. Hold on. Let me get that value real quick. The callback URL is actually the redirect URL for where the web browser client is going to be sent after the OAuth authentication occurs. And in the case of working with something like VoltMX Go, this is going to be the URL of the VoltMX Go Foundry server. But just keep that in mind, and you will get that from your other applications that you're working with if you're working with something other than VoltMX Go. Startup page, I have to enter something here, and because the application hasn't been created yet, I'm just going to enter the value of my Domino server and the home page of my database. The scope, I need to select, and I need to press the plus button. So keep that in mind because I forgot that, I didn't know that initially and my scopes were never getting added. I'll update my icon and click Add. So now you can see here you have your application card. It has an application ID. And to get that schema, or to get, that client secret or the application secret, I just need to click this Generate Application Secret button. And now I have an application ID and an application secret that can be used by consumers outside of Domino to securely access information in my Domino databases through the Domino REST API. So that's how that is done. Alrighty, so what I now want to go over real quick, because we're quickly running out of time here, is I want to talk about the promotion process. Because, you know, just like we do with our current Domino databases and their design elements, we don't change those in production. We do that in a development environment. Designers work in development, they make changes, and then they typically hand off an NTF, a notes template file, to the Domino administrator, and the Domino administrator goes through a process like replacing the template on the server and then doing a design refresh or replace. So when we get to the Domino REST API and exposing those databases, like it was said earlier, it is another joint adventure where the developer in a development environment is going to create that schema, and then they're going to hand off that schema to the administrator to promote into production, and they're going to go ahead and create the scope and the OAuth, if needed, the OAuth application. So I'm going to walk through this real quick, and I have a video that I'm going to show you. So give me 1 second here to get to the video. All right, so setting the stage here, we have a development server called Go Showcase. And also as part of this, there is a production server called Rock Adventure. Buckaroo Banzai, he is a Domino developer, and he's working on a project where he is modernizing an existing Domino application and making customer information available to a native mobile application. So he has gone ahead and he has created a schema in the demo database on Go Showcase that includes the customer form and its fields, along with defining both default and DQL modes. Also, he's added 2 views that display customer data. Now, he is ready to have the Domino administrator, Dr. Notes, promote this schema to the demo database in production on Rock Adventure. So Buckaroo selects source and then presses the export button. The schema is exported as a JSON file to the default downloads folder on his computer. So now Buckaroo goes to his favorite mail client, which happens to be HCL Verse, and he creates a new email message. Here, he addresses the email to Dr. Notes and requests the new schema be imported to the demo database on Rock Adventure, along with creating a new scope and OAuth application. Also, he attaches to this email the demo customer JSON that was exported from the development server. Now, using a Notes client, Dr. Notes receives the email message. In it, he sees Buckaroo's request to promote the new schema to production and create a new scope and OAuth application. He detaches the JSON file and copies it to the Rock Adventure server. Next, Dr. Notes goes to the admin UI on Rock Adventure, and he creates a new schema, but this time he is going to use the import schema option. As part of this process, he selects the JSON demo customer. He verifies the demo database information and saves it. And here you can see that new card demo customer has been added with a bridge icon. Now, just as I went over a few moments ago, the next step is to create a new scope. And in selecting the new scope, he will select that specific schema for the demo customer and then add in some additional information. And yes, this is where when I did this, I did type slow. But you can see we have a different scope name here defining specifically it's for customer data, calling it demo customer. We have a description being added. We're going to go ahead and we're going to select that Rock Adventure server. And we're going to set that icon again to be bridged so that we have a consistency across the cards. Now, because the end goal is a Volt MX Go native mobile app, Dr. Notes is going to need to create an OAuth application. So he goes ahead and clicks Add Application, and then enters in the necessary information, giving it an application name, giving it a description. He defines the callback URL of his Voltimx Go Foundry server. Again, because this is an application that is being developed for right now, the startup page will be that of the demo database webpage or default webpage. He selects the scope of demo customer and updates the icon to bridge to have consistency across the 3 cards. Now, as a final step, Dr. Notes is going to go ahead and generate that application secret. So now, Dr. Notes will provide Buckaroo with the application ID and application secret that will be used in the native mobile application to access the demo database's customer information through the Domino REST API. And there you go. That's how you promote from a development environment to a production environment. All right, Matt, do you want to talk real quick about what we need to do for fault tolerance, high availability?
So with load balancing and proxying and then setting your Domino servers up in a cluster, what you would do is you'd set your cluster up as is normally done with any of the Domino servers that you've worked with in the past. Make sure that you configure your load balancer to point to one of the Domino servers there on the back end. Those Domino servers, each single one of them has to have the Domino REST API installed on it, as well as the keep config NSF, as well as the OAuth NSF to be able to have that available, replicated across the members. You're also going to want to go ahead and set up that permanent JWT token so that if you bounce from cluster member to cluster member, you're not re-challenged for those authorizations.
Right, exactly. All righty, so, like I said, and we are going to make this slide deck available. It will be available on OpenNTF for download, but there is so much information for learning more, okay? First of all, first link, and these are links. So the first thing here is on the HCLU website, there is a self-paced free class for Domino admins to go and learn about the REST API. It's interactive, it has tutorials. Please go ahead and take it. Also, like I mentioned, we got that Discord Domino REST API channel, so please go there with your questions. I recently did a blog series that you can access through that Domino admin What You Need to Know link. Tio Hesselman, Graham at the beginning mentioned Engage. Tio is the founder and organizer of the Engage conference, and last year at Cloudsphere, he actually did a great session on how you can take Power BI and a Domino database and hook them together using the Domino REST API. So you can check it out through that link. And then finally, we have that online documentation. Please use it. It is a great primary source. And some common questions that I've come up with or I've heard other people ask me, they're listed. I have some of those listed here. They're all available in that online documentation. One of mine that I just want to touch on real quick is creating a Domino database using Postman through the Domino REST API. It's a tutorial, step by step. I'm an admin. I don't develop, but I followed that, and I successfully created a Domino database with a form and fields and a view. So if you're an admin and you want to understand some of this of what your developers are doing, you can go ahead and use that tutorial. And I know we're running really quickly out of time, and I apologize. I love sharing my this information with y'all. So again, I do apologize. I don't know how many questions we have, but if we don't answer them, we'll definitely write up answers and post them to the OpenNTF site. Okay,
yep,
Graham.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, you can keep that up. There's only a couple of questions, and I fear that one is slightly off topic, and the other is probably more complicated than we have time for. The slightly off topic one, though, I'm going to take a stab at. The question is, why do we need this REST API when Domino has the Domino data service? And my quick answer to that is Sardar Baishmez, who's on the OpenNTF board and has been for over 10 years, has done quite a number of presentations about REST API access into Domino databases. And if I'm not mistaken, there's at least 6 different ways to do REST access into Domino. So this is just one more on the list. by all means, check out Sidar's presentations, and those you can get at through OpenNTF as well. But maybe I'll throw it to either one of you two to chime in there as well if you want.
Yeah, or maybe Ron, do you have why you want to use this over like data services or another way of getting to Domino through a REST API?
There's just much more or different types of functionality available through the Domino REST API than through the Domino REST API or the APIs that they share. There's just the number of endpoints available is significantly larger. Things that you can do with the Domino REST API. It depends on what you're trying to do or how much you're trying to accomplish.
And Jesse's just chimed in too. The Domino Access Services was the first and really hasn't been enhanced or developed since it was put into Domino, whereas the Domino REST APIs is the newest way of doing things. So you're getting very much the latest and greatest.
Jesse's absolutely right. I think the rest those initial data services came about like in 8 or 8.5, so they definitely have been around for a while.
And we run out of time. Tuan, I'm going to save your question. If you don't mind, I'd appreciate you jumping into the Discord server and asking your question over there. It's a very developer-specific question, but it's a great question, and by all means, jump in on the Discord. And for clarity too, Heather, you mentioned the Domino REST API channel on the Discord server. So the reference that's in the Keep browser page points to the OpenNTF server. There's a very specific channel there for Domino REST API conversation. So invite everybody to head over there. With that, I think we'll wrap up. Appreciate you guys and lots of great detail. In fact, we've had people chiming in on the comments saying thanks, and they're going to come back and rewatch this on the video. So great job, you guys. Thanks again, and appreciate everybody's time, and we will see you next time.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you all. Take care. Bye.